All right. We do have a member who has COVID, and all we're doing is recording it. We are not streaming it. So if you know someone else who wants to view the recording of tonight's meeting, talk to Mary Beth and Frank. Got it.
I don't see that on my screen. This is
The other screen, or maybe we're not recording.
just, I'll figure it out.
That's weird.
It's just asking me to say, okay.
Oh, is it your screen?
Yeah.
Oh. Like it used to be.
That one.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay, so we are.
Thank you. Welcome to the September meeting of Cross Timbers Master Naturalists. Is anybody visiting tonight? Okay, Zane, you don't count as a visitor. You count as you're our mascot. Hi, welcome. Do you mind telling us your name? I won't make you stand up if you go back. Hi, Becky. Everybody say hi to Becky. Hi. We're glad to have you. I will begin the meeting with a few announcements, and then we'll take, for just a few minutes, we'll take some discussion about hybrid meetings. If, with your permission, I'd like to postpone discussion about the dues increase until the October meeting, which is when we're gonna vote on that, when y'all are gonna vote. I did bring copies of the budget that the board approved in January, and also my wacky list of what we've spent this year. Our wonderful treasurer, Chris Castoro, and his wife have had a few manageable health issues. Is that a good way to say it? You know, like, you know, getting bones and joints fixed and things like that. And their adult daughter said, "You're moving closer to me." And they said, okay. So they have now moved in near the San Antonio area in Schertz, Texas, which Hester and I can pronounce, can't we, Hester? in Schertz. And so we may be hearing from Chris with the Alamo area chapter very soon. He did agree to do a treasurer's report for another month or two, which segues me right into the announcement that we are still looking for someone who could take on the treasurer's job. We currently use QuickBooks. We are currently using an out-of-date version of QuickBooks, so that might be changed. That's negotiable. We just need someone who's able to do the accounting for the chapter. As president, I am able to sign checks up to a certain limit. Which has made me work really hard to keep everything documented. I am signing some checks, but I'm not trying to go into I don't know QuickBooks. Ask me about biochemistry, DNA, biology, but not QuickBooks. And if you're willing to help us, please talk to Bill Collins, our immediate past president. Thank you. A couple other announcements. Events are starting to come up again. And one event that, you know, with people and crowds and things, one event is on October 8th at River Legacy in Arlington. It is their fall festival. If we are going to have a booth there, which we have done in the past, we have to have people to work the booth from getting there at 10 a.m. until 9 p.m. And so I have a sign-up sheet there for folks who would be able to participate at the CTMN booth.
And we're going to pass that sheet around.
Thank you. We have folks here who are gonna be with the Native Plant Society booth. We have folks here who are going to be working with River Legacy's booths. So those folks have already signed up. So we need a few different people who want to, if you've never been to River Legacy, it would be your chance to go see it. It's pretty neat. I need to know that, like, I need you to sign up tonight or by the end of the week, because I have to return the form by the end of this week. We also, along with all the other chapters, have been invited to send the state office up to 10 photos of master naturalists at work or at study. I'm adding that, studying and work. And there is a person in charge of collecting all the photos from the different chapters. And those photos get put on the screen. You know the words, it'll come to me. It's not, I swear it's not Alzheimer's. It's just the word is in there somewhere. Projected on the screen. And it's fun for people who are attending in person to see the different pictures. So, and like she needs that by the end of this month or very well. If you will send me an email that you're willing to do it, I will forward. I think her name is Donna Moore. She is not with our chapter, but she's working on that for the state. Save the date, Monday, December 12th. The Hoot and Hollerin', I just made that up, holiday party. And we're going to return to the Tarrant County Resource Connection. For those of you who like, where is that? It's over near TCJC South. Oh, it's not TCJC. I'm old. TCC South Campus. It's where the Master Gardeners have their training, and there's a lot of other Tarrant County buildings there. And we've just reserved that room. Same place we had it last year. Really nice parking. I don't know. We'll have to ask. I'd like to know if anyone who's here tonight is going to attend the state meeting. Avon? Okay. The state is, I'm going to attend. The state is offering a $100 travel discount. And so I need to hear from you. You know, again, subject lines make a real difference for me. Am I going to pay attention to the email or not? But right, I'm going to the state meeting in the subject line, and then I'll forward that email. We'll get together on it. We do have a lending library, which is pretty interesting books. We would love to get some more folks to bring in books, either books that you borrowed from the lending library before COVID, maybe, or some books you have yourself. And there's no sign in, sign out. It's just take it and bring it back whenever you can. What else do I need to say, Hester?
That's pretty much it. If you look in your bookshelf, I bet everybody here who's been in for a while will find they have 2 or 3 of them that they need to bring back in. So please.
Okay. The issue with in-person meetings, Zoom meetings, hybrid meetings. I realize that a lot of us have concerns. I realize that here we are having a meeting about equity and inclusion, and it's an in-person meeting. And what we really need is we need someone who is willing to manage and have or borrow, or maybe the board can fund some more equipment to be able to get these meetings Zoomed. As you may have noticed, it took a while, and today it's just not simple to get all this organized, and doing it once a month is Well, actually, Mary Beth has been zooming the training meetings. Mary Beth isn't able to attend for the next couple of training meetings, so she did find a couple of mentors who are going to Zoom the training meeting. That's happening once a week from August 15th, roughly, to October 15th, roughly. And so our focus has been on getting those Zoomed. Last month, we had a completely Zoom only meeting. And this month, it's my decision, you know, and it's only about this month. It's not set in stone. It's not forever. So, but what we really need is someone who can manage it and organize it. And I heard the phrase take charge. Because we're doing as much as we can right now. So we can take about, I can keep my mouth shut maybe for about 5 minutes and let y'all talk. Yes, ma'am. Okay. Forgive me, remind me of your name.
Chena Casper.
Hi, Chena. You're one of our trainees. Yay! Welcome, Chena. Yeah, oh, what other trainees do we have here today? And they're going back to the Nature Center tomorrow for a 3-hour class. Yes, ma'am?
I taught through COVID for 2 years, hybrid and in person, having the management at the same time, so I can also.
And your name is?
Madison.
Madison. Oh, you're Madison. Gover. Gover. Yeah, you presented to us one time, didn't you? No, you didn't present, you did an announcement.
I was talking because I was on my phone, I didn't have a. Well, she talked about the,
Bio Blitz at Dinosaur Valley State Park. Yeah, so we all know you, Madison.
she was the first one.
Yeah, I'm intern. Yes, thank you. Bless your heart for teaching hybrid. I retired before that.
Biology. So it was very scary, but I got through it. So
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
I'm willing to help. I probably don't have the experience you know, but if somebody shows me what to do, then we can, I could willing to be on some committee and we can make a plan and try to make some commitments about.
Right. Are you Holly?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Thanks.
I'm willing to help as well.
Okay. Yeah, and help is appreciated, but we're gonna need someone who can coordinate it all. You know, that's a lot of what we need is someone to coordinate. Thank you. Anything else? Okay. Although as I said already, I really don't think we have time tonight to talk about budget. I did want to give you the most recent totals that are in the wells, but most recent that I have right now. I thought I had August. No, I don't have August. From July 31st, the Wells Fargo accounts that's the Cross Timbers Master Naturalist accounts. In the checking account, there is $6,500. I rounded that because I've written $1,000 in checks. $6,500. In the savings account was $15,800. That almost never changes. You know, add a couple pennies every month. So that is the most recent balance. All right. Now what you came to hear, who you came to hear, our speakers. Vicky Brooks, TCU. Yay! She's teaching future nurses, y'all. This is important. You better appreciate her.
We're really important. It's so important, Mary Beth wanted me to do her job. She said, can you introduce Veronica? And I said, well, yeah, of course. And she said, and can you talk about your DEI committee that we're doing with Problem Birds Master National? Much better, don't. Maybe close to that, Mike. Yeah. Oh, there you go, thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit first about our Cross Timbers Master Naturalist Diversity Committee. So our committee we created in October of 2020, and this is after Gina Alexander and I, wave your hand back there, Gina. We had just finished our training. So we wanted to really kind of maybe, see what we could do to work on this. In fall of 2021, our DEI committee began. We talked to the board and they approved it then. So I do want to make a shout out to who's been on our committee for the last year and a half. And that's Gina and Sharon. Y'all know Sharon. And then Paul Roach, I saw you come in back there. And Michelle Fire, I don't know if she's here. Yeah.
Here.
Where's Michelle? Y'all see her? And then Sandy Thornburg.
She's not able to be.
Okay. And we still need more members, so if anyone is interested in that, we would love to have you in our committee. We really just, the majority of the work that we do is from January through May. And then some of the things that we've worked on, thank you, Gina, for sending me this list. I only had like 3 or 4 things written down. So we've made recommendations to the board to continue offering hybrid meetings for training purposes, which again is what Sharon was talking about. We supported the Texas Parks and Wildlife DEI playbook that was shared April of 2022. We've been working on new project sites for our DEI efforts, and a couple of those were on the sign-in sheet over there, and one of them is Hope Farm. And Gina's in charge of that one, and she may want to talk a little bit more about that in just a second. We also helped produce the 2022 cohort application flyer to help increase diversity. And we did have about a 20% increase in diversity with this new cohort that are here right now. And that really is about it for what the committee's been doing. And I do want to talk real quick about the Glenwood Park cleanup event. This is October 29th, and it's been in the newsletter too. Thank you, Sharon, a couple times. Evan, yes, Evan. I did get an email from Evan being like, who are you again? Or no, are you a customers? Anyway, we're working towards creating a climate safe neighborhood in that area for right now, but there's more to that. Gina, do you want to talk a little bit real quick about your project with Hope Farm? One of our new projects. Last year, and we had a sign-up sheet. And Sally Boyd, she and I worked together twice in May before it got too hot. And so we took a little bit of a hiatus, but we started back up. And so there are 2 dates in fall already set. And then we have particular people we've reached out to, we'll continue to reach out, and I'll probably send individual messages. So I didn't get responses in the past couple of times. I sent out ask people if anybody was interested in that. They have a model that was really great in the PK, and it just needs a little bit more TLC. I think it will not take that much effort, especially for the regional market. And then the conservation credits, Betsy Marsh and Kevin Lab with the Tennessee regional water, kind of grant that they are going to work with our leadership to If anybody has a pollinator garden or other kind of garden and water conservation features that they want to have, let me know, because Smart Regional Water, or you can reach out, I can share with you contacts with Smart Regional Water, because they have money and expertise to bolster the existing pollinator gardens that we have. So keep that in mind. That doesn't have to go full work.
I think just in county.
So if you're on I-35, you take I-30 to I-35 that leads south, and then keep. At my, I'm very directional. It's east of 35, and might be Rosedale, it's the east of 35, just east. Next to here, if you drive up 35, you see a large, basketball gym and facility, and we have a beautiful courtyard here, very expansive, and one section of that is a really nice monarch way station and a little orchard area, and then Glenwood Park is off Rosedale and Riverside, intersection there, it's 30 acres. And you can log in volunteer hours through the natural habitat cleanup. It's a large expanse of green space in that area, just needs to be beautified. Like, Fort Worth beautiful.
Thank you, Gina. Okay, so now I would like to introduce Veronica. So this is Veronica Villegas. Is a longtime communications and program administration professional who currently leads the Municipal Equity Division of the City of Fort Worth's Diversity and Inclusion Department. She came to the city in 2008 with a wealth of news marketing savvy after working for more than a decade as a journalist in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. In her current role, she's responsible for overseeing the development of the city's municipal equity plan, progress of the Race and Culture Task Force recommendations in diversity, equity, and inclusion education, and engagement for employees and the community. She is a graduate of the University of North Texas. She brings to the city her insight for managing a variety of media platforms and capitalizing on opportunities to not only tell the city's story, but also engage the public. She's also has worked as a consultant for government and nonprofit organizations where she provided full service communications, planning, and project management. In fact, we might need you here. And she also brought some good handouts and some car fresheners.
So thank you for that introduction, and I apologize. I thought I had printed out my notes to go with my slides and realized I printed out two of the same thing. And so I now have to read my notes from my laptop, but at least I have my laptop. So bear with me just a bit. So the first thing I want to do is to talk a little bit about the City of Fort Worth's Diversity and Inclusion Department. Yeah, how many of you were aware the city has a Diversity and Inclusion Department? Okay, very good. So the department was created almost exactly 3 years ago, and it was following it was a recommendation of the Race and Culture Task Force. There were 22 recommendations, and one of those recommendations included the creation of this department. And the task force was convened by the mayor and council following some incidents we've had here in the city regarding police interaction with some of our communities of color, and just it really heightened the awareness that the city really needed to take a closer look, not just at what was happening, not just the interaction between police and our community members, but also what was the city doing in terms of equity to make sure that all of our residents are being treated equitably and were receiving city services in an equitable fashion. So that was kind of the genesis of where all this came from. So you might be asking, what have we been doing for the last 3 years? I will tell you that a lot of the work that we do is very invisible because we, as I mentioned, we are literally starting from scratch, trying to unravel decades and decades and decades of data and how the city has been functioning. and how, and just the sheer task of even identifying the scope of the service gaps, of where we need to focus in order to bring equity to all of our communities, has, I will tell you, quite frankly, been more than a little overwhelming. We are a very small department, one of the smallest departments. We are less than 20 people. When the department was created, there was really only one new staff member added to the budget for this department, and it was our director, who is Christina Brooks. The department is comprised of 3 divisions: civil rights enforcement, business equity, and municipal equity, which is the division that I lead. Municipal equity is the completely and totally new division that has never existed in any way, shape, or form at the city of Fort Worth. Civil rights enforcement does exactly what its name implies. They enforce our local, state, and federal anti-discrimination laws in the areas of housing, employment, and public accommodations. We also manage the city's ADA compliance and any complaints related to accessibility. And we've been doing that for a number of years. In fact, the city of Fort Worth was one of the first municipalities in Texas that had a local anti-discrimination ordinance, which actually afforded more protection to more classes or groups of individuals than even our state and federal laws. So we are very, very proud of that. We are contracted by the federal government, the EEOC and HUD, to accept cases, to accept and investigate and conciliate and resolve cases on their behalf. So if you ever feel like you've been discriminated against in housing, whether it's an apartment or getting a mortgage, but I will say most of our complaints tend to come from renters, or if you feel you've been discriminated against in your place of employment and it's within our city of Fort Worth's jurisdiction, you can come to the city of Fort Worth to file your complaint instead of having to go to the federal office. So I just wanted to mention that. The other thing I wanted to mention is that even in our housing complaints, anyone guess what the #1 cause of complaints might be? It's actually disability. Most of our complaints come from folks who have been discriminated against based on their disability. Yeah. Just wanted to share that because most people sometimes don't even realize that your disability is a protected class, and it is. Business equity is our other division that I mentioned that also already existed within the city of Fort Worth. It was located within the economic development department, and they were primarily, before coming to the diversity and inclusion department, they were responsible for contract compliance with the city's MWBE vendors or contractors. And so MWBE, the minority women business owned enterprises. And so the city has different, depending on the different projects, there are certain goals that we try to meet regarding MWBE, and that division was responsible for making sure the contracts were being met. Their role has shifted a little bit to not just be in the compliance, but be more proactive. And instead, they are now educating MWBEs about the opportunities that exist and preparing them and helping, guiding them to resources that can make them competitive with other non-MWBE contractors who are seeking, who are seeking work, who are seeking to do business with the city. So that's their primary role. And then the municipal equity plan is that part that I told you about, where we are seeking to make sure to come up with a plan that ensures equitable delivery to all of our city services, and that all of our residents are experiencing their interactions with their city staff and with the services are just the same as any other member, that everyone's being treated equitably when it comes to their interaction with the city of Fort Worth. And we have something like 23 different departments. When you start thinking about all the different services we provide, it's a lot. I mean, even I, for having been at the city for 15 years, are still learning about, oh, I didn't know we did that. When you think about stormwater, you think about sidewalks, you think, all these different little things. When we build a building, making sure that, doorways are wide enough and, there's buttons there that, that allow the automated opening and, you look at parks, and again, we're gonna talk about that, and that's really kind of something new I will tell you, for the Fort Worth parks, is looking at that equity piece. So, that's, I've got, Vicky's got some brochures that talk about our various, divisions, and so I'm not gonna dive too much into that, but I do want to kind of address, a little bit about, the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion in parks and recreation. Now, while we in municipal equity don't necessarily set park policy, we are a resource to all of the 23, 24 odd departments that we have as they began to examine diversity, equity, and inclusion within their own organization. And Parks Department, we've got some really large departments with, hundreds, sometimes, more than 1,000 employees sometimes. So we are a resource to all of them. So I wanted to talk a little bit about just kind of provide a baseline on this topic. So let's see here next. Uh-oh.
Computer's behind.
Oh.
Shouldn't matter. Should be all pointed anywhere. Throw that in.
It's a nice little tree though,
Yeah.
doesn't it? Advance from there. Well.
I will advance you.
Oh, wait,
You give me-
that-
Well, I will if it will let me. Right there. That's what's doing it.
So while he's like, doing that, I want to say that a lot of the information I'm about to share from you has been sourced through
You gotta get over here.
through the National Recreation and Park Association, as well as the National Health Foundation.
We're just having lots of fun.
Sure.
Well, no, I asked.
You wanna go to the ski?
I've been sitting on that too long and find out or something.
Stop sharing. You can do that.
Well, I'm not logged in, I'm not connected to this.
Oh, do you need to see your mouse out there on the screen? Yeah, there you go. See the screen.
Have to get on the other screen.
Move it this way or move it that way.
Yeah, I know.
You know.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
it is. There it is, right, we see everything.
You may just have to stop.
Okay.
It won't even come back out of that. Everything was going fine out here.
That's okay, so I'm just gonna go ahead if you guys don't mind. So although the US is rich in recreation opportunities,
There and go to.
not all residents have equal or equitable access. Parks and recreation are critical infrastructure to society, adding beauty, clean water, clean air, places for exploration, recreation, socialization, and peace. However, they also represent places of discrimination, segregation, trauma,
See
and
it.
disparity.
Yeah, if I can hit them.
Yay! There you go. Okay. So the question is, why is that? And so I offer a few things for you to think about. Accessibility and proximity, cultural factors, economic barriers, systemic racism, and outdoor spaces. They're all things for us to consider. So to expand access, one must first understand the factors that have shaped the unfair access and distribution of park and recreation facilities across the community. And this is a quote from Christine Fleming, who was a professor in the Department of Health, Physical Education and Recreation at Florida A&M University. So, as park and recreation professionals and academics continue to focus on the need to establish equitable parks, the willingness to recognize and evaluate the history of segregation in leisure and recreation as it relates to African Americans must be considered. Obtaining historical information into how parks and recreation programs were established helps to provide additional insight into how programs are managed and the need for additional support and resources to establish equity in programs. While the responsibilities of each park and recreation professional and academic varies depending on the role, we must be willing to own the responsibility if equity is truly our intent. To formulate a strategy to combat the factors of inequities, we must be able to recognize historical policies and practices put into place during the Jim Crow era, which continues to impact parks and recreation. That insight, again, is from Dr. Fleming, who wrote a report for the National Recreation and Park Association, I believe it was 2 years ago. Next slide, yes, please.
You got it.
So, I have listed 3 things up here that kind of dig a little bit deeper into that, dig a little bit deeper into some of the reasons for the inequity that has occurred in our park and our outdoor spaces. One of those being historical contemporary land use policy, whitewashing of history and land ownership, and racialized economic policies, employment discrimination, unequal access to quality education, and other fundamental tools that can build a person's economic standing, which makes outdoor recreation inaccessible. So I just want to touch very briefly on each of these. So historical contemporary land use policies have shaped the contours of public park and recreation spaces across the nation in ways that continue to make it easier for some and much harder for others to experience open spaces. So some examples of that are that, for years, African Americans were denied entrance to national parks. In fact, it wasn't until 1945. But even then, the presence of African Americans in some parks did not occur until after the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Meanwhile, local and state parks continued to reinforce segregation despite the federal laws, meaning that places where African Americans could enjoy the outdoor were few and far between. Access was difficult and segregated, and often of lesser quality than those in the white-only areas. Other examples of policies include local ordinances that outlawed integrated forms of recreation, i.e. blacks and whites could not swim together in the same public swimming pools. So all of these things continue to have an impact on equitable access to parks. And even though they happened a very long time ago, they do still continue to have an impact on recreation programs today. And depending on the size and the demographics of an area, disparities that exist today are connected to the history of these policies and practices. So, how can we make the outdoors more inclusive? In the next slide. So here are 5 ways that are kind of big picture, but then I'm going to touch on some other ways that are happening kind of within public recreation, park and recreation organizations, primarily municipalities and such. So the first is to teach the full history of American outdoors, to make all visitors feel welcome and secure, to create underlying policies on diversity and fairness, increase economic accessibility, create more access points for all, and to make open spaces more representative, culturally relevant, and cool. So this can manifest itself by advocating for policies that have racial and spatial justice at the forefront, taking a deeper look into how ownership, access, and the perceived threat of violence play a role into the history of our outdoor system, and then to spread awareness and demand greater accessibility to the natural world for all, i.e., free and low-cost programs and transportation to natural spaces. So I know I talked on a very high level about accessibility and proximity to outdoor spaces, and some of those cultural things as to why we don't see more people of color engaging in outdoor activities. And I wanted to share with you just kind of a personal anecdote. I have a sister. My youngest sister is 15 years younger than I am. And I remember when she was in college, she was invited by her boyfriend, who ended up being her husband. They've been married for 10 years now, to go skiing with them in Colorado, with he and his family. And she never, we live in Texas, number one. But we wanted to kind of text them to vacations in the wintertime and went skiing and knew how to do those kinds of things. So she goes off on this, well, she prepares herself, rents the skis, rents the, gets the clothes, and she's off on this trip. And as her older sister, I remember getting a phone call from her, and she's just in tears because the skiing thing is hard. And I know it's hard for a lot of people, but she was just beside herself, and it just seemed that everybody else who was there, like it just seemed to come so easy to them that some of them had been skiing since they were itty bitty little kids, and they've been going, to Colorado with their families for, forever. And it just kind of seemed to be a natural, innate thing to do. And she wanted to come home so bad. And I said, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And I remember I know she was being funny about it, but she was like, this is why brown people don't ski. And I've often looked back at that and thought to myself, there's a lot of, it's funny, but there's a lot of truth in that. And so it does come back to that proximity, and it does come back to that accessibility, and it does come back to that affordability that, there are many outdoor activities that, that require, they're not just right outside. If you live in the inner city, it's not easy even to get to the nature center, up in our northwest quadrant of our county. If you're a kid and you rely on your bicycle or, having to walk somewhere for your recreation, being out somewhere like the nature center is like a million worlds away. And then not just to mention like the cost of some of these, rock climbing again requires special gear and tools, and sometimes training and lessons. And so a lot of those things just simply are not accessible to many people. And so when you've never grown up or lived that way, you think it's not for you, and you inevitably pass that along to your children. So like I said, I just wanted to share that very brief story. My sister is a very good skier now. It's taken her a lot. But I have actually never been skiing. I took my kids once to a little bunny slope somewhere in Missouri, and I remember my son was adamant about learning how to snowboard, and so I paid for the lesson. Again, I had that privilege of being able to afford to pay for that lesson for him to do that. But I was like, son, you are on your own, because I can't help you there. But yeah, again, I consider myself to have quite a bit of privilege myself. But even so, there are definitely some outdoor things that I never grew up even experiencing or having had the opportunity to experience. So, with that, I'm just gonna pause here for a moment and see if there's any questions or comments or anything anybody would like to share. I will add that, so when you ask, well, what's the city of Fort Worth doing to make things more equitable, and making things more accessible? And I will say, a lot of the work does begin internally, and it's things that our residents don't see. So a lot of it starts with, who are we hiring? Who do we have in place teaching programs? Because oftentimes it is just, staff level individuals who are developing programs. And if there isn't diversity within our staff, then they don't bring a diversity of ideas or different thoughts on kind of differentiating, not doing the same kind of program all the time. And a lot of it does come from really taking a hard look at yourself and saying, where and how can we do better? And a recent project, how many of you have been to the Log Cabin Village? Okay, so they have really, so the Log Cabin Village is interesting because it is an outdoor facility that resides within the Parks and Recreation Department, but it's also really a living museum. And so what their approach has been is the story they have often told has often been a very white, very Anglo-centric story. But as we all know, there were African Americans and there were Hispanics living during the same time as well. And so they have amended their program to add these different perspectives. And so when you go out there, you will see signs that acknowledge, the involvement of other individuals, other demographics that lived here in Fort Worth and in Texas during that time, and will, kind of explain their contributions as well. So that's one way in which the parks is taking a look at its programming. But again, inclusivity isn't just about race either. It's about accessibility for those who have perhaps limited mobility. We are doing some great things about improving our access into the actual like interiors of some of our parklands. And I think most of you have probably seen, we have at least two, I think maybe three now, ADA accessible playgrounds. One at Trinity Park, and there's one Southwest, and I think there is one more that recently opened, but I can't remember the location of that one. So again, inclusivity and diversity and equity, it impacts all of us, and I think we all benefit from it.
Some of those folks here that don't live in the city of Fort Worth, how could they find out if their city is working on being more inclusive in the parks? Because that's our thing.
Right. So that is actually a really good question, because I'll have to admit, I think I only know about what's going on in parks because of the department that I work in, and because they've reached out to us to collaborate and to seek feedback and information and expertise regarding that. But if you were to go to the parks website, you really wouldn't see anything that says diversity, equity, inclusion. These are I think that so many entities are treading in this space very, very quietly and carefully, because it is new space and it is a new territory, and it is an area that isn't without obviously a lot of I don't know if controversy is the right word, but definitely people have different opinions about it. Yes, ma'am.
I found out on Tuesday that the Fort Worth Nature Center does Spanish speaking tour, like trail walks, which I thought was really amazing.
Yeah.
I didn't know that they did that, and they're fully Spanish speaking, and I thought that was a really cool thing that they're doing now. Should that maybe we'll find out for it.
Right.
Sounds pretty cool to me.
Yes, and that's kind of like catch-22 is that, I think you have to start offering the programs first, but it's going to take people a long time to begin to feel comfortable and welcome in those spaces. And because when you traditionally haven't that hasn't been your thing, it takes a little while to kind of refocus your brain on what, hey, what can I do? Or where, what, hey, I can, this is something that isn't just for, a certain demographic. So I think it does take time. Yes, ma'am.
How is the access to green spaces in neighborhoods we would say are economically disadvantaged
So I, w-
compared to the
yeah,
the economically
So-
advantaged?
right.
Huh? Yeah.
So, not good, I will tell you.
City working on that?
So that is part of, one of the things we're identifying in the executive plan is where are the gaps? And it is definitely very zip code generated. One of the examples I like to give about the municipal equity plan, which I remember when our assistant city manager, Fernando Costa, used as an example with our city council, there was kind of a, oh, that's what that means. And so the example he gave is, do you know how, if you've ever had like a light that was out and you got frustrated because it never got fixed, the city never came out and fixed it, and someone says, oh, call your city council person, it'll get fixed right away. And there is a lot of truth in that statement, okay? So what that means is that the squeaky wheel is getting grease. Whether or not, and sometimes, I'm not saying I will, they need it, but what about the other neighborhood somewhere else that doesn't even have the street light? And so when we're busy meeting the squeaky wheel, it means that something else, another part of town that maybe has never even had the street lamp, has had enough street lamps there, they're not getting theirs. And so with the municipal equity plan is an attempt to identify where are the needs and who last got what, and how can we make sure that with our limited resources that people are basically getting their turn for their improvements, for their, their upkeep. And that's a very different way of looking at things. And, I think we all say we all want to be fair and equitable, but then when it comes right down to it and you realize kind of what that means, it's like, oh my gosh. And so I think we have to, really look to ourselves and decide, well, what's important, how do we want to spend our tax dollars? What is important? So that's, I think, I think it's one of the challenges of delivering city services in an equitable manner is that there are, especially when there are limited resources, and the reality is there are always limited resources. But again, in fairness, when you have to look, growing up, my mom, she punched a clock. So she never had time to call the school about something or to, call City Hall because the light is out or something else. And so I think for those of us who do have that time to do that kind of thing, I think we forget that to us that seems perfectly normal. Oh, I'll just call the city. I'll just stay on there. We forget that there are so many of our residents who don't have that luxury. They don't have the luxury or the time or the ability to advocate for themselves. And so I think, I personally believe that it is incumbent upon the city to kind of level the playing field and to make sure that the least of us is being afforded the same services as our more fortunate residents in other parts of the city. Did that answer your question? Yes, sir.
Anecdotally, it appears that there's a tradition in the Hispanic community, right, of people using park spaces. I'm thinking about family gatherings,
Yep.
Soccer, for instance, there's a big group of folks who play soccer. Is that true statistically as well? I mean, that seems what it looks like to me, but I don't know.
I don't have statistics on I don't have statistics on that. I will need to ask our Parks Department if they, so what I will say is that it is difficult to quantitate that.
Yeah.
And so like the discussion I had with the Nature Center, like literally last week, he's like, you know, we just like barely got a date. Like we, yeah. So we couldn't even tell you who was coming into our space. And actually I had this conversation with the public library as well, because the public library, you don't sign up for public library services. You come to a reading time, you just come. And there is no, you don't have to present an ID, or you don't have to sign up per se for any particular program. And so for them, they also are kind of in the same boat of knowing exactly who their patrons are, what the demographics are of the patrons that they're serving. So I think that is one of the big challenges of outdoor spaces is being able to know what demographics are actually using them. And even when they are able to collect data, like if you're renting a facility, or if it's hard to know exactly, you know, what the true numbers are, and what the true demographics are as well. So I'm sorry I couldn't provide a more detailed answer for you. Is there any other questions or comments or? Yes, ma'am.
I'm just curious, if you think that there would be a way for this master naturalist up here to partner with this vehicle award and help with some of these efforts, and if so, what would that partnership look like? Like, what can we do to support your efforts?
Right. So in terms of
Yeah, I mean, that is the first.
So he said,
Right, so, more.
Right.
Step in the right direction.
Right, and I know that's happening, and that's certainly a great start, and absolutely, but it's just also like, I'm curious, and I'm sure maybe y'all have already had this conversation with her having before, but I'm just curious.
right. So I think that so we have connected Vicky with some grassroots community organizations, but I think it takes time. You can't expect to go out one time to see somebody and tell them about your great Master Naturalist program and how they would really love it and how much you want them to come and be a part of it, and for them to go, okay, yeah, I'll be there next week. I mean, it really takes cultivating. There is so much like, I don't know about that. It's hot. Why are you all of a sudden interested in inviting, you know what I'm saying, when for years and years and years and years, no one's ever come to us and invited us, and now you're inviting us, which is great, but you know what I'm saying, there's just kind of that arm's length, a little bit of suspicion, and just not being, it's outside your comfort zone. And it really takes, I think, a lot of time and consistent interaction with new groups in order to bridge that gap. We did a really fantastic, it was before COVID, we did a fantastic program with First Night of Methodist, I think it was First Night of Methodist Church. The church on Summit, if you're going toward the Target from 30 on the left, that church.
Yeah.
And Mount Moriah Baptist Church over in East Fort Worth. And we did a little mini film series that looked into, I think there were like 4 different films. They were like, I don't know, 30 to 45 minutes each. And it was about unconscious bias. And the 2 churches, obviously very different demographics. And they decided that they were going to host each other. There were 4 films, and so 2 of the films were at Mount Moriah, and the other 2 were at the church off of Summit. And they still get together. It's like been 4 years later. We had potluck. I mean, each one, you know, they brought food, they sat and ate with each other and got to know each other, and then watched the films, and then we had these kind of facilitated discussions after the film. And it was through that, and again, this happened over a period of like, I think it was 2 months, 4 films, it was like every other week. But it was over that time period that they had the ability to like get to know each other and be comfortable with each other and to have spent time in each other's space. And that collaboration is still going. And they took a trip together to see the Selma Bridge. And like I said, it's that kind of, I think, commitment and ongoing interaction where you really start to see barriers kind of come down, and to see groups of people who may not have ever crossed each other's paths come together and see and share their commonalities. So I thought there was one more question, but maybe not. Yes, ma'am. Mhm. I don't know. I know that Fort Worth ISD does take some field trips, but as we
Private, selecting, and like my school, we go out there, I think mostly.
and a lot of
smaller,
It's funding,
it's funding. Yeah, it really is. Buses are incredibly expensive.
And they don't have enough bus drivers right now.
I mean, it's unfortunate that something as small as a bus ride is literally what keeps kids from experiencing those types of things. Yes, ma'am.
Program. for The rec center. They don't call it rec center, it's a community center.
Community centers,
I think the children from underprivileged households that go to this center, go on field trips and they get to overnight camp and get to dish, which, you're not allowed to camp in the nature
Right.
center. So, it's a really great.
Yes, that is part of the Fort Worth Camp Program. It's the, they provide, it's actually really open to anyone, but it's a very low cost, affordable, day camp program. And sometimes they do have these, those activities, like you mentioned, the overnight. I remember hearing that was, actually, I think this past summer may have been the first time that they did the overnight.
they used to do it years ago.
Did they?
Gave it out.
Okay.
Give it out, and then they didn't.
I was an intern, so
Yeah. Well, we have a really awesome film that I'm excited to show you guys. And again, it I think kind of illustrates what I was talking about, the, brown people don't ski. I think that's kind of the theme for this film, and kind of the sentimentality of the subject, the gentleman who is the game hawker. And so